So rise of British power in Bengal. Okay, so now we'll see in the previous chapters, you all remember we had seen how the Britishers were slowly and gradually taking over the territories which started ruling independently, isn't it? Now in this chapter, we will see how the Britishers took over the Bengal territory. What things did they do? What strategies did they apply? All right, the advent of the British in India. The British first came to India as traders in the year 17th century. Please underline. British came to India as traders in 17th century. However, in the middle of 19th century, the British succeeded in eliminating all their rivals and established an all India empire. Please underline this. So please understand, initially the Britishers came to India as traders, and then slowly and gradually they started succeeding, taking up, they're expanding their territories, and they established their all India empire. Okay, in their scramble for political power, the conquest of Bengal proved to be an important milestone for the Britishers. So in their process of expanding their territories all over the India, they reached a milestone, which was the most important milestone for them. It was Bengal province. Okay, only once they were able to conquer their political power in Bengal, it proved to them as an important milestone. So let us see why it is saying that Bengal province was an important milestone for the Britishers to establish their empire. It set a stage for further conquests and establishment of British as the rulers of India. So it was the Bengal province which was considered as a stage for these Britishers to establish and to further increase their conquests, establish their empire and further increase their conquest. Now let us see what actually did the Britishers do in the Bengal province and why the Bengal province was considered as an important milestone for the Britishers. All right, let's understand first about the East India Company. Okay, the English East India Company means what? The Britishers had established this company. Okay, in the year 1600 CE, a popular company known as the East India Company was established by a small group of British merchants. Please underline in your textbook at least the East India Company. Wherever I'm asking you all to highlight or underline, please make sure you all do it, because you all will definitely get an objective question based upon that. Okay, so this East India Company was established by who? By some small group of British merchants. The Queen of England, that is Elizabeth I, granted the company exclusive right to trade with the East. Okay, so now these people, these small group of British merchants, they were working, or they were under the rule of whom? Under the rule of the Queen of England, that is Elizabeth I, and she gave them the right to establish the trade with the East. The company had enormous profits by buying Eastern goods and then selling them at high prices in the European market. So usually what these Britishers had come initially, as they entered India as traders. So what they used to do, they used to buy the raw material from India. Okay, and they used to collect that raw material at when a very low price from Indians, and they used to sell the same thing in England at a very high price. So in this process, these merchants would get a lot of profit. All right, so see the point over there. The company made enormous profits by what? Buying the goods and then selling them at high prices in where? In the European market. Okay, so this was the way through which they were getting lots of profits. the Queen received a share of the company's profits. Now, since these small group of British merchants who had established their company, they were working under the leadership of the Queen. So they used to give a small share from their profits to the Queen also. So the Queen was also happy. Now, the English East India Company set up its first factory in Surat. Please underline, you will definitely get a question based upon this for fill in the blanks. Where was the which the East India Company had set up the first factory where? In
Surat.
Surat.
East
Okay.
India Company.
It was a trading settlement consisting of warehouse for goods, an office for keeping records, and residential quarters for the servants, that is employees of the company. Nothing was manufactured in these companies. So the East India Company had first set up their factory in Surat. Now this factory was just for the trading settlement. What all things were there in this factory? It consisted of warehouse for goods. It was considered as an office for to keep a records, or it was considered as a
Quarters for the people who are working in the company.
Yes, residential quarters for the people who are working over there as employees. All right. By the year 1623 CE, the British had established factories in Surat, Bharuch, Ahmedabad, Agra, and Masulipatam. Please underline. In which year did Britishers had established the first?
Surat, Bharuch,
in
year 1623. In 1623 CE.
In which year the East India Company had first set up their factory, set up their first factory in Surat? Which year? What was it?
Ma'am, may I?
Ma'am, the English East India Company set up their first factory in 1620 CE in Surat. 16,
not 20, it is 1612. Okay.
12.
Yeah. And then by the year 1623, in which places the East India Company had set up their factories?
Ma'am, may I answer?
Yes, Vivan.
By 1623, the English East India Company had established their factories in Surat, Bharuch, Ahmedabad, Agra, and Masulipatam.
Okay, Masulipatam it is. Okay.
Yes, ma'am, Patnam.
Okay. Now, how many years were did they took in between to complete their journey from one factory to so many factories? How many years from 1612 to 1623? Yes.
11.
Yes, Vivan, tell.
Ma'am, 11.
11 years. All right. Okay. So now next, pay attention and underline this word. This is very important. Sir Thomas Raw, the British ambassador to the court of Jahangir, had obtained many trade concessions for the company from the Mughal Empire. So Sir Thomas Raw, he was an ambassador, okay, British ambassador. What did he manage to do? He managed to take a lot of trade concessions from the Mughal emperor. At that time, it was the Mughal emperor who was in power. In the year 1639 CE, Madras, which is now Chennai, was given to the British by local ruler. They established a trading settlement which they fortified and named it as Fort St. George. Okay, so in the year, again they had, Madras, which is now called as Chennai, was given to a British local ruler. And they over there in Madras, they had established a trading settlement. All right, under whose name? Under the name, and named it as Fort St. George. Where this happened? It happened in Chennai. Okay. And then in the year 1688, can you see the way they were expanding their territories, the Britishers? Slowly and gradually, how they were expanding their territories?
Yes, ma'am.
Somebody's mic has been unmuted. Please mute. Yes. In the year 1688, Charles II gave the company at a nominal rent of £10 per year the island of Bombay, which he had received as dowry when he had married a Portuguese princess. In a course of time, Bombay became the chief settlement of the British on the western coast. So now see how they were gradually, expanding their territories, and they were using all the possible ways to do that. Then again in the year 1688, what did they do? Charles II, he gave the company, at a nominal rent of hardly 10 pounds per year. But yeah, but then he was able to take up the island of Bombay. How? By marrying the daughter, okay, as a dowry. When he got by marrying the Portuguese princess. Now, with this particular place, they, in a course of time, that means gradually, they were able to put up their settlement even in Bombay, on the western coast of Bombay, okay, which is located on the western coast. All right, Bombay, now referred as Mumbai. Okay,
Ma'am, I have a doubt.
in the year 1690, let's continue. So where we were, in the year 1690 CE, a British trading settlement was established and fortified in Calcutta. It was named as Fort William. So now, after Madras, that is after Chennai, they targeted Bombay. After Bombay, they targeted Calcutta. Can you see? Now they established again their British trading settlement in Calcutta, and they named it as Fort William. Please underline that in your notebooks, textbooks. Now, Madras, Bombay, Calcutta, these three became the headquarters of the British settlements in the southern, western and eastern regions. You will get a question, okay? Which was the headquarter in the southern region of the Britishers? Name
Ma'am,
the
it was the
southern, just the southern.
ma'am. Can I tell?
Yes, Shreyas.
Ma'am, it was the Madras.
It was Madras. In western, which was the headquarter at western? Yes,
Bombay.
Yes, Aditya.
Ma'am, I actually want to ask something.
Okay. Now, in the eastern region, which was the settlement?
Ma'am, may I?
Yes.
Calcutta, ma'am.
In the eastern region, it was Calcutta. Okay. So now, each of these headquarters, please turn. Each of these headquarters, known as presidencies, was placed under the charge of governor. Okay, so now when they had set up their headquarters in each of these three provinces, so where were their headquarters? In Madras, in Bombay and in Calcutta. So all these headquarters had a governor. Okay, they had appointed a governor to take a charge in these headquarters. By the beginning of the 18th century, several British trading companies had joined together and formed one company, okay, called as United Company of Merchants of England trading to the East Indies. Please underline. By the 18th century. So they utilized the entire 17th century to gradually increase their territory, expand their territories. And by the beginning of the 18th century, what they did, whatever territories they had expanded in different areas, they joined all the territories together and they formed one company. And they named it as United Company of Merchants of England trading to the East Indies. All right. The French East India Company. Now, the French East India Company was formed in the year 1664. Please underline this. The French East India Company was formed in the year 1664 and its headquarters were where? In Pondicherry. Okay. Pondicherry is now known as what? Now called as what?
Puducherry.
Puducherry. Okay. It also established trade settlements in Surat, in Masulipatam, in Chandernagar and Mahe. When the French arrived in India, the British were already well settled along the coastal regions. So now it is not just the East India Company, it is the French also who had entered India, and they also set up their headquarters in Pondicherry. Now, when they entered India and when they tried to establish their settlement in these four places, they found that Britishers had already arrived in India, and they had already well settled in all the coastal regions of India. Now, the Anglo-French rivalry. By the 18th century, the two major European powers in India were British and French, right? On one side, it was the Britishers who entered India and started expanding their territories. On the other hand, we had the French. So now, by 18th century, there were only two major European powers who were ruling in India. Who were they? One was the Britishers and the other one was the French. Yes, the Portuguese by the beginning of the 17th century had lost their influence as well as their monopoly over Indian trade. The Dutch had also been edged out of the competition by the British and the French. So in the competition, along with British and French, there was Portuguese also and there was Dutch also. But they were not able to compete with the Britishers and with the French people. Okay, so they were edged out. Clear? That means India was considered initially, India, you all must have heard about this as well. Initially India was called as the golden bird because India is considered as an agricultural land, and they used to collect agricultural stuff from India at a very cheap price, and they used to sell the same thing in their own countries at a very high price. So initially, India was the target for all the other countries. Now let's see, since now we know it was British and French who had powers in India. Let's see what happens further. The French and the British were both equally determined to establish trade monopoly in India. So there was a competition going on between these two people, these two countries. On one hand, French, on the other hand, Britishers. But compared to the French, the Britishers were already settled. Yes, because by now they had already set up their territory and established their settlements in most of the coastal regions of India. So, but still there was a competition between these two countries. Why? Both of them had one aim. What aim they had? They wanted to establish their own trade monopoly in India. Now, an intense competition followed. They became arch rivals in trade, and this rivalry eventually led to wars. A power struggle became inevitable as their commercial rivalry intensified, and the French tried to secure and use political influence to ruin the British trade. So definitely, definitely, when there is a competition, initially there was a competition, then gradually this competition turned into war. And in this war, the French was trying to use its political influence so that, somewhere or the other, they could win over the British rule. All right. Now, the commercial rivalry between the British and the French in India was aggravated by the fact that these two countries were political rivals in Europe as well. So it is not that these two countries were having, rivalry only in India. They were having rivalry in India along with where? In Europe also.
In the Europe.
Okay, in Europe as well. So taking advantage of the decline of the Mughal power and the unstable political conditions in the country, they fought 3 wars in India to establish their supremacy. These wars were referred to as a Carnatic Wars. Please underline and encircle this. Carnatic War. It is very, very important. Underline Carnatic Wars. I'll just explain Carnatic Wars and I'll stop here. So what exactly is a Carnatic War? Carnatic was the name given to a Coromandel coast and its hinterland. So now these people, see, the Mughal power was declining, all right? And there was political instability in the entire country, okay? And therefore, in that particular situation, in that particular environment, 3 wars were fought in India just to establish their power, okay? So that just because there were 3 wars, it's called as the Carnatic War. Got it, everyone?
Ma'am, I want to ask.
Yes. Have you all understood till here?
Yes, ma'am.
Everyone?
Yes,
Have you
ma'am.
all understood, children?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.